Alrighty, guys, welcome to Chat with the Brewer Live. My name is Seth. We're broadcasting from Wooden Legs Brewing Company in Brookings, South Dakota. This is week 7 or 8, or I don't even know what it is. I actually have Max on the other end of this video chat. Max, you stand as the farthest person from this pub that has ever called in. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Hope you guys are all well.
I think we're doing good here. A little cold. You know, actually, we kind of want to know where you're from. We're interested in what brewer you're representing, what your position is there. Why don't you go ahead and tell us here at the pub and all the viewers where you're hailing from there, Max?
Yeah, so I'm Max. I'm from Grand Teton Brewing in Victor, Idaho, which is just on the other side of the Teton Mountain Range from Jackson, Wyoming. I am the cellar master and barrel manager for Grand Teton. I've done a fair share of brewing as well, but now I focus on the fermentation and all of our barrel projects.
Well, excellent. I think this is probably the first episode we've ever had a cellar master on. Now, I've taken the liberty to pour the crew here a couple of local favorites, at least the ones that I think that the crew here likes. We're going to taste through them in hopes that maybe you could help us understand these different styles and maybe some of the histories of the beer here. I think the one that we're going to start with is the one that always gets the eye raised when we say it's Bitch Creek and it's an extra special brown, right?
Yeah. That we get a lot of eyebrows raised at our pub ourselves with that beer. It's a great beer. It's one of our most popular beers for sure. I don't know if it's all because of the name or I like to think it's because the liquid is pretty good itself.
Well, it pours is a very nice brown color here. ESB, that's actually a style that seems to be forgotten these days in the craft beer. But you guys have made Bitch Creek for quite some time.
Yeah, we have, and in our ESB, we call it an ESB, but it's really far from a traditional ESB. We call it an extra special brown, really roasty, lot of chocolate, and pretty good astringent bitterness comes from a lot of those malts we use. And it is not a beer that is shy with hops. We use quite amount of hops in that beer, just about the same amount as in the Sweetgrass actually, just at different points.
And on the neck here it says, I'll try to get a camera over here, it says 60 IBUs, 6% by volume, and bottle condition. Do you guys bottle condition a lot of your beers?
Yeah, we bottle condition almost every single one of our beers. Right now, the only two that we don't condition are beers that say pretty local to us and are consumed pretty quickly. They're also pretty seasonal, consumed pretty seasonally. So if we're sending a lot of our beers off, we do prime them in the packaging tanks and the bright tanks. We hit them with a small amount of corn sugar, some dextrose in a priming yeast, a dried yeast. We recirculate the tanks, and then those bottles will sit for about 8 to 10 days in our warm room. So we have a room that we keep at about 77, 79 degrees year-round. I also keep a lot of our sour barrels in there. It's a great multi-purpose room, and all the beers will sit there before they're shipped out.
So you guys truly do it kind of this old school way of bottle conditioning, just like the homebrewers of the day do.
Yeah, we definitely do. And when we get homebrewers coming in on our tours, they definitely are pretty shocked to see that we're doing it pretty similarly to, if you were to fill a bucket or a keg or however you're bottling your homebrew. It's almost the exact same way, just in the magnitude of thousands of gallons at a time instead of maybe 5 or 10.
Well, I like this one. We're going to try the Sweetgrass next. I'm going to let the crowd here get into it and taste it a little. While they're trying their initial tastes here, why don't you give me a little bit of history? How old again is Grand Teton, and how long have you been with the company?
Yeah, so Grand Teton, it started in 1988. I guess that brings us to just about our 26th year. This June, I guess, will kind of officially be our 27th year. The brewery started originally in Wilson, Wyoming, which is about 8 miles over the pass, over Teton Pass from us, so just in Wyoming. And it was started by a couple of brothers named the Otto brothers. Unfortunately, one of them is no longer alive, but Charlie is very much alive and actually still lives in the valley. Some point in the late 90s, they decided they wanted to expand, and they went to the state, but the state of Wyoming was a little hesitant to allow them to do that. So instead, Charlie and his brother Ernie picked up and they moved over to Victor, where we are now, which is about a 30 to 40-minute drive, depending on the season and the condition of the mountain pass, from Jackson. And we're over here now, and the brewery's been here since. I myself have been with the brewery. I'm coming up on just about 3.5 years or so. I started on our bottling line, filled kegs, brewed our night shift. Now I run the cellar in our barrel program and play a lot with our new recipes, which is a lot of fun as well.
So 1988. That makes you a granddad, I suppose, in the years of craft beer. So that is awesome. You guys not only are the farthest from Brookings, but you are actually the oldest of the breweries that we've talked to yet. So that's pretty cool. Let's learn a little bit about the sweetgrass here. I think we've passed it around a little, and they say they definitely get the hop aroma from it.
Yeah, definitely. Sweetgrass is definitely one of our most popular beers. We have a couple pretty large fermentation tanks here at the brewery, and Sweetgrass and another beer are the only beers that occupy those tanks. Sweetgrass, we wrote down a couple fun facts, or not really necessarily fun facts, but just facts on the beer. We use 5 different hops in pretty gracious amounts. We use Super Galena, any of the Columbus, Tomahawk, or Zeus, the CTZ hops, Zythos, Cascade, and a hop called Bravo. We dry hop it with about 4 pounds a barrel, which is a pretty generous hopping. It's got a nice light malt bill to it as well, so I really think those hops can shine. Definitely citrusy. Sometimes you get some floral as the beer gets a little bit older, but it is an easy drinking pale ale, that's for sure. It's definitely a favorite in the valley and of our brewers.
I think the Sweetgrass was probably the first beer that I was ever introduced to from Grand Teton, and this stands probably still is one of my favorites. It's always fun to kind of start with a brewery's American Pale Ale, and you can kind of predict the roadmap after that. It's like a good sandwich or something at a restaurant. If they can put a good Pale Ale together, there's always good opportunity in the other things we're going to do. So I'm getting nods around the room here. We definitely like this one. I actually have a couple more that I even want to taste. This one we just got in, and I don't know if you can recognize the bottle here. Maybe you can.
Yeah, absolutely. 5 o'clock Shadow.
This has the bison on it. So give me a little. This is the double black lager. Let me know about this. The 5 o'clock Shadow here.
Yeah, 5 o'clock Shadow. So we brewed that for the first time about 3 years ago now. With those Cellar Reserve and the large bottle formats, we like to bring those beers back. No sooner than 3 years after brewing it for the first time. So this beer we brewed back in about 2012. I guess we would have brewed it actually in 2011, but it sits in the tent. The fermentation takes lagering for quite some time. So finally packaged in 2012. It's the same recipe we used. It is a great cellaring beer, so I highly, highly recommend drinking one fresh now and certainly picking one up and tucking it away. It really smooths out, and some great chocolate notes come out of that beer. It's a pretty simple beer. It is a lager. It's brewed with the Ondex lager strain, like the Ondex Monastery out in Germany. I think in the United States we can find it from White Labs under the Commonwealth lager strain. It's kind of a variation of that. But it's a unique lager in that the yeast profile is definitely much more fruity, a little more floral, not as clean as most lagers, which we like. And we actually brew all of our lagers with this yeast strain. And simply hopped, just got some Galenas. We use Galenas for all of our bittering. It's a great Idaho hop, and we like to source it here. And then for the aroma, we're using some Hallertaus as well. Great beer.
This is exceptional. The taste, like you said, is very clean, but just has some of the subtleties of the hops in it. I catch a little bit of the alcohol in it. 7.6 as the bottle reads, but it's not hot. I mean, it doesn't come at you like some of the big ales. Now you said this says 2015 on the neck, so that was bottled this year. And when did this go through the brew house then?
That was bottled this year. That was bottled probably, I guess the bottled on date would be there. I don't really actually remember. Everything kind of goes as a blur. But we brewed the first batch of that, I think, right around Halloween, actually, of last year. And so it's a nice long ferment. It takes about 6 to 7 weeks for it to fully ferment. We pitch it at about 56 degrees, and I bring it down to ferment anywhere between 50 and 52. Once it's hit the final gravity, we lager it for 6 to 8 weeks at 34 degrees, and then finally it'll spend about 2 weeks to 3 weeks at 32 before we move it to packaging.
That's awesome. That sounds like a pretty complex lager profile. Sometimes to tease those really cool flavors out of lagers, you got to baby them just a bit. I think the last one we have here is this one's coming off tap. It's the Coming Home from this year. So this has a cool story to it. I'll let you tell it.
Yeah, so the Coming Home this year's is great. I'm glad you guys are able to sample it. It's probably one of the rarest beers at this point that I've been able to be a part of at the brewery. We sold out of that before we even released it in package, which was pretty exciting. So we knew we had a bunch of bottles going through, and then we actually had to put out a kind of a request form for all of our employees. So everyone had to actually fill out how many we wanted so we could allocate. So we only sold maybe a dozen cases or so through our pub, and we only had a couple kegs. I've squandered a couple away just because this beer ages really well and love to tap it later on. But the Coming Home is a great beer, fun beer for us. We produce it in a very small amount, and it is our holiday ale. So doesn't really use a lot of actually no holiday spices or anything like that in this beer, but we do brew it at a much higher strength with the hopes that people can cellar it, enjoy it with family and friends around Thanksgiving, the New Year, Christmas holiday, whichever people please. And when it comes out, it definitely goes quick. And it is a big beer. This one especially is a big beer.
We've got a couple beer fans around here giving the thumbs up to this one. You can actually mark it on your map that one of your 6-barrel kegs is right behind this cooler wall right over here, about right where Angela is at. So it won't last here very long. All very, very good beers. Now, we've tasted through a lot of these. If Grand Teton had to define a style, what do you guys see? What is the Grand Teton style?
Ooh, the Grand Teton style. Something I discuss with our owner quite frequently is how I feel none of our beers have a house flavor, and I think we brew each of our beers to be super unique, and each beer definitely has individual flavors to it. I mean, we've skilled brewers, we've developed some great recipes, we utilize a lot of different malts and hops, so for me to pin down an exact style might be hard. However, what we do know is that the water we use at the brewery, which we don't treat at all, we don't use a charcoal filter, we don't reverse engineer it and use reverse osmosis. We do nothing to our water. We just turn the faucet on, and it's the water that's coming out of the Tetons through a spring that's just a couple miles or so from the brewery. So we're really lucky to have such wonderful water. And now that water is most closely built in terms of mineral compound and other nutrients and things like that in our water to the water of Munich, Germany, which is why we find ourselves brewing a lot of German styles of beer. The 5 o'clock lager, or the 5 o'clock Shadow, is a great example. It's inspired by the Schwarz beer, essentially, meaning black beer, black lager. But we do brew it much, much bigger than a traditional Schwarz beer. We just brewed a Maibach lager, and we find ourselves brewing a fair amount of German-inspired beers. We're now starting to dabble in the Belgian world. So I guess if I really had to pin down a style for us, I think some people definitely know us as the Bitch Creek Brewery, but I think I see us as kind of a German lager brewery. We definitely brew those well in German-inspired beers, and I can definitely attribute that to both our water and the fact we get our malt from environments. So.
And that's a really cool point. So the American craft beer scene seems to be pretty heavy in the English ales and the Americanized English ales. Where do you see the lagers fitting? I mean, all of these, and I think everybody would agree, are very, very good beers. Do you see there's a big palette for German-inspired beers in the craft beer world?
Yeah, I think German craft beers, I think the craft beer world is pretty unique in that a lot of people that I bump into, maybe that come into our pub at first and want to try some beers, who haven't maybe tried craft beers, or friends who haven't tried a lot of craft beers, and I feel a lot of people push, those hoppier beers, American Pale Ales, English-style IPAs, American-style IPAs, big hoppy beers, which might not be as inviting to, your traditional beer drinker who might be accustomed to a Coors or a Bud product or something. So the German styles, I think, they're so inviting. Maybe the 5 o'clock Shadow might not be as inviting as some, because it's black as night, and some people get that stuck in their head. Oh, black beer, it's going to be heavy. It's going to make me really full. I'm not saying the 5 o'clock's not a heavy beer, but it's still smooth. It's still easy to drink. You can point out those chocolate flavors. Some of the lighter lagers in our Oktoberfest that we brew are definitely for just the everyday beer drinker, and even very experienced and well-versed craft beer drinkers. So I do think there is some light and German style beers between Kolsch's and Oktoberfest and things like that, and hopefully people can expand into some of those more intimidating German styles, Doppelbocks and Schwarz beers and things like that, those black beers.
Well, Max, you in a night of first, you actually elicited the first boo from the audience here. I heard a word that started with the letter B, and it was the first time that I've ever actually heard live feedback from the audience here. Hey, good question for you. How about your distribution? I know we can get you here, but where else does Grand Teton deliver to?
Yeah, so obviously our core market's going to be Idaho. We brew a beer specifically for Idaho, which unfortunately doesn't make it out anywhere of the state. It's called Ale 208. 208 is our area code. Very, very easy drinking beer, light in hop. So we focus on Idaho, and we went back to focusing on Idaho with this beer. We then get into the neighboring states of Montana and Wyoming. We're down in Colorado. We're in the Dakotas. We're going to start making our way towards Kansas. We are currently in Missouri, Chicago, and Minnesota. We're in South Carolina, and we're opening North Carolina, about 2 weeks from now, hopefully branching out into some of the other southeastern states. We're going back into Seattle probably by the end of summer, as well as other parts of Washington. The panhandle of Idaho is about to get really big for us as well, we hope, as we have reestablished ourselves in the state.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've got a pretty good-sized footprint here. We've seen you in South Dakota and appreciated here for a long time. To service all the states, what size of brewery do you guys have? What's your annual production?
Our annual production right now is just over 10,000 barrels. So on the scheme of craft beer, it's small-ish, if you will. We are the largest in the state of Idaho. However, there are some breweries in Boise and the Panhandle that are definitely catching up to us. So we're doing 10,000 barrels. We brew on a 30-barrel brew house, and we have, 4 or 5 of us who are trained brewers, or trained at making wort. We are definitely a hands-on brewery, so everything that we do, there is no automation to our brew house. The bottling line is a different story, but the brew house, we're paddling in grain, we're dialing in temperatures with different knobs. It's definitely a great way to handcraft our beer, and I definitely nod my hat to a lot of our brewers who are just very skilled at what they do, because each of our beers, I feel, comes out pretty consistent every time. And there's no automation helping that. It's just them being great brewers. So we're brewing. We start about 5 a.m. or so. The first brew will go in right about this time of the year. We're usually done about 2 a.m. So the first brewer comes in at 5 in the morning, leaves around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. If everything's going smooth, the other brewer is in by 2 p.m. and leaves when everything's done. Now, that's about a 3-mash day on the 30-barrel brew house, and come summertime, we might push 4 or 5 brews some days. And on Fridays, we don't brew often. We definitely take time to clean the brew house, and that's when we make our sodas. We actually make 5 craft sodas, and we'll brew it in our kettle that way. Just take all Friday to do that.
You guys got brewing full time. That is a lot of brewing around the shift, around the clock. So, do you guys have a tap room on property there? Like, if people come up to the brewery there, do they get tours, tap room tastings? What's the story if they make their trip out to Victor, Idaho?
Yeah, so you make your way out to Victor, Idaho. It's a sleepy little town, that's for sure. But we've seen a pretty large increase in tourists and even some more local presence coming into our tap room. And we have a very, very small tap room. What I'm looking at, where you guys are all sitting is, I would say, a good 5 or 6 times the size of our tap room. And we have probably 25 seats or so. In the winter, it definitely gets crammed with all sorts of skiers and tourists coming off the mountain and everything like that. The summer's a different story, though. We fortunately sit on a fair amount of property where the brewery is, and we have a nice big lawn that's got some horseshoe pits, and we've got all sorts of events that go on, and people can bring their kids in the summer, and people just sit and relax. We have a food truck that rolls up just about every day here in the summer, which is an absolute treat. I find myself eating lunch from those guys a couple days a week, that's for sure. And it's a great atmosphere. We do tours. You can do tours by request or by reservation, or just we have walk-in tours as well. Most days in the summer. In the winter, I'm not really sure. There's not as high of a demand in the winter for our tours, but yeah, full functional tasting room.
Well, I'll have to warn you, the camera adds 30 pounds and at least the appearance of 45 seats, so that's not quite as big as it may look in HD here. But we enjoy you coming in and doing this. So tell us about your social media. I know that's a way that we get our message out. How can our viewers and our followers in the pub here keep up with you guys?
Yeah, definitely. So we're on almost all the social media. We have a Facebook page that's updated pretty regularly. I actually do our Instagram account. I'm walking around the floor all the time, playing with barrels, checking out bottling, brewing. And so I like to think we have a pretty up-to-date, fun Instagram, so there's all sorts of cool behind-the-scenes brewing things going on. We do have a Twitter account as well, which is linked to all those, and you can check it out that way. We do have a newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website. I do write a blog as well that I call The News from the Underground, which is a fun little place that when I get around to it, I update people on our beers, and mainly focusing on the 750s, and occasionally you'll find some of us writing for some magazines, and Idaho Brew Magazine and such like that in the state. So we're around, and you can find us just about anywhere. I think it's just everything is at Grand Teton Brewing. That's awesome. Thank you very much for that. I'm actually going to pour myself another beer, so I'm going to open the floor.
Now we've got our first question here. All right, I'm going to go grab another coming home, and I'll let Ray take.
As fans of German beers, do you
Yeah.
have any plans to brew a Marzen?
You know, we do. We brew one every year, actually, and it's the only beer we do not bottle. It is a fun beer for us to brew. We brew in a very small batch, and we do have an Oktoberfest pretty annually here at the brewery, in which that Märzen goes pretty darn quick. Again, that beer would be brewed with the exact same yeast the 5 o'clock Shadow is, the Ondex Lager strain or the Commonwealth Lager strain. And it varies year to year. Sometimes it's a little paler Marzen, sometimes it's on the darker end of things, and it's definitely well hopped, and it's about 6% alcohol every year, and it is a very quaffable, fun beer to drink.
So I think Chris is our rep over here in this area. He's over in the Twin Cities there. We did an event last year, and he let me in on a bit of information about the legacy of the Growler as it intertwines with the Grand Teton here. So I need you to confirm it here. I've told people the story, and I probably haven't done it justice.
Yeah, so it's a great story about the Growler at Grand Teton. We I guess can take credit for bringing back or legalizing or definitely being one of the grandfathers or fathers of the Growler in the U.S. So it goes back to the original founders of the brewery. Mainly to the man named Charlie Otto. And so Charlie had originally moved to Jackson Hole to be a skier and just to in the late or the early 80s, I guess, to ski the Tetons in this elusive place. And while he was doing so, he found it was much easier to give his friends at the time what was his homebrew, soon to be professionally brewed beer, a Growler in these old glass milk jugs. And it comes back to the story that he and his brother remember, and how his father and friends and uncles, when they were working construction, they would give them their old tin lunch pails. And at our brewery, in the tasting room, you can see one of these original tin lunch pails. And their fathers and friends, whoever, would ask these boys to go run down to the local brewery and fill it up when they were done with their lunch, and they'd run back to the construction site or wherever they were taking it, and as they ran, the CO2 would escape from the beer, and it would push the lid up, and the lid would kind of flutter and kind of make these noises, and all the boys started saying it was growling at them. It was this Growler. And so they remember it, and then eventually these men started referring to it as the Growler, kind of as their code word, to get the boys to go fill up these pails with beer. And so now, it's all changed, and Charlie remembered that and brought it back and started reusing it. It's much more environmentally friendly, draft beer right then there at night at home, or if you want to save it for a day. And so he was hand silk screening everything and actually took the legislation to the U.S. government and got it passed to be a legal container in the United States, which is really great. So he did that for us and for all craft beer drinkers, and we're very appreciative of what he did for the Growler. And,
well, there we go. It's etched in history now. Cool story. And we, as you can see around, if maybe you can see on the camera, up around our bar, as we put all of the Growlers that we get in from all over. So those are kind of our little symbols of the industry there. Speaking of the industry, where do you guys see this going? I know you're focusing a lot in Idaho. Where do you guys see craft beer going in your area and all throughout the U.S.?
That's a really great question. There's all sorts of surveys and things out there, and in polls, and which way people are leaning in terms if they're going to enjoy an adult beverage. Is it going to be spirits? Is it going to be wine? Is it going to be beer? We see craft beer continuing to rise, and it's great. And we're expanding, and a lot of breweries are expanding, and craft beer is just a great outlet for people to enjoy a really delicious, well-crafted beverage. In our case, we're definitely still focusing on the core market. We're trying to figure out what's new and what's exciting. We're working on a lot of really fun projects here at the brewery between our barrel aging. You may have noticed that we don't produce a year-round IPA, and currently that's a project that I'm working on with some of our other brewers. So we're playing with that, and we're just trying to adapt and to continue to grow. And really give the consumers what they need. And if that's a sour beer, we're going to do it. If it's more German lagers, we'll do that. If it's just producing Sweetgrass and Bitch Creek, we're fine with that as well. But we see it growing.
So just over your left shoulder there, I see on the camera here a very familiar icon. You can turn around and look at it. I believe that is Lost Continent, is it not?
Yes, it is. It is Lost Continent.
Now that used to be a full-time, all-the-time beer, right? And now that's seasonal?
Yeah. So that is definitely a sensitive subject here, both around the brewery and in the valley.
Well, I saw it, so I was going to call you out on it, just so you know.
I am happy to say that there is 180 barrels of Lost Continent happily fermenting away in the brewery, and we're going to be packaging it early next week, actually, which is very exciting. And there is talk of maybe brewing a little bit too much, so it can be available for just a little bit longer. And it's
consider at least some of them pre-sold.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit more about the seasonals. I know when I talked to Chris, you've been playing with the seasonal concept, mixing things in and out. What do you guys have full time, and then what should we expect seeing coming up this spring?
Yeah, so so we got the large bottle format, the Cellar Reserves. That 5 o'clock was the first beer of the year. The next beer that we'll be releasing is a sour Saison, which has been a really fun project. It's a beer that's blended with 3 different batches of Saison, one of which is a straight-up Saison fermented on the Saison DuPont yeast, which is really great. We're actually brewing that tomorrow or the next day. Another batch is brewed with Saison, the Brettanomyces Dre yeast, so it'll kind of give that barnyard classic funk to the beer. And then we're also doing something that I've been working on for a souring, an in-house souring method that we use. So we have the Saison, then we'll have the Black Cauldron, the big stout. We're actually bumping it up from, I think, where it sits about 8%. We're going to bump it up to a 9.5%, and that'll be available back in bottles for the first time for a couple of years.
Applause through the audience, actually, on that one.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm really excited to brew that beer again, and I'm hoping to put some away in some whiskey barrels. Would be great. Then for our seasonal, for the 12-ounce 4-packs, the year-round we do, the winter is, or I guess the every year that we do in our seasonals, 4-pack is the Trout Hop Black IPA, which was once a Cellar Reserve. Actually, all of the beers in our seasonal program were once Cellar Reserves. They were so demanded and requested that we put them in 4-packs. Trout Hop Black IPA and the Lost Continent, which is now the spring seasonal. The summer seasonal is kind of the black sheep of the group. It's a Berliner Weiss, an Imperial Berliner Weiss, actually. So it's a 7.5% sour wheat beer. It's brewed with lactobacillus and our house Hefeweizen strain, and it's very delicious in the summertime. And then in the fall, we brew the Pursuit of Hoppiness, which is our Imperial Red Ale, pretty much like a red IPA. Great beer as well. And those are what we've got. Those are our every year offerings for our seasonal program, and those big bottles, they change every year. I guess right now what we also are doing in the pub is the IPA project. We're doing as many IPAs as it takes to really hone in our next year-round beer. And like I'd alluded to earlier, we're trying to find that beer to make really make a big brother of Sweetgrass, but a little brother of Lost Continent. That's something that we still can call an IPA. So right now we're running a bunch of hop trials, and you can only actually find those beers in the pub and at one restaurant in Jackson. So that would be probably something up your guys' alley, and you should definitely talk to Chris about tracking down some of that IPA. It's in very small batches, but it's really fun beer. And then the most exciting thing we're doing is our Brewer Series beer, which is all of our barrel-aged beer. And that's going to be really special beers brewed in very, very small amounts. We're only going to do about 336 cases of each beer, and we'll be kicking that off hopefully this spring with an American sour that I've been aging. It's a wheat-based beer with Brett, Lacto, PDO, Hefeweizen strain, and they've all been aging in wine barrels, and we're going to get some really big beers out of that. We're going to boost up the quad and make it about 16%, and we're going to brew a sour brown, and we're just going to really start to play. It's really going to test our brewers and fermentation skills. I'm so excited for it.
Well, I'll tell you here that I've heard hoots and hollers in the background here. I can definitely tell you've got a place to test them here. If Chris gets them out here, this crew here will always be guinea pigs, right? They will be the happiest bit of guinea pigs that you may ever see. Hey, we're going to wrap it up here, but before I do, I appreciate your time. The one thing I always ask for the last, as one of the last questions here, if for those people out there watching this show or people that come to your pub that say, I want to get into craft beer, I want to be a brewer, I want to be a cellarman, I want to do this thing, what words of advice do you give them?
Sometimes it depends on who is asking me. I've had some guys who have come in and told me they've brewed one batch of homebrew and they're going to open a brewery, and in some cases I tell them they need to go back and keep doing it for a little bit longer. It's definitely a labor of love, and we work a lot mornings at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. are not uncommon, and leaving the brewery much into the night is also. So sometimes what I tell people is if they're home brewers already, which I think is a great step, it's certainly how I got my foot into the brewing world. If you're a home brewer, really dial in a beer. And some of the best advice I've received from professional brewers that I'm colleagues now, people I've judged with and people I've brewed with, have told me, brew the same batch of beer 50 times, and if it's perfect every time, then start thinking about, where you want to go from there. If that's bothering someone at a brewery or trying to start your own, that's a great place to start. And, what I did is I walked in and just told the brewmaster here, and I was like, I want a job. And he hired me to work on the bottling line and just worked my tail off. And, you're sweeping floors, you're cleaning drains, you're doing it's not a pretty job brewing, and I have to remind people that too. It's definitely being a glorified janitor sometimes. Very, very little are we really brewing all the time. It's a lot of cleaning. So I make people really reflect, think about how clean they are, and if they've homebrewed, and if they have any knowledge of it, and that'd be my advice.
I appreciate that, Max. Thank you very much for your time here. You've made some more fans, increased fans, out of the Grand Teton Brew. We'll have them on tap here all week. Hey, you know what? Keep brewing great beers. Thanks for your time tonight, and we're looking forward to some of those that come out of the cellar.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you guys very much. Keep drinking good beer.